Harley Whitehead is a British sapper and volunteer in the Ukrainian army. He's played an active role in liberating Ukraine and helps to save lives and limbs through efforts to demine territory occupied by Russian forces. He's been in Ukraine since 2019, prior to the full-scale invasion. Hopefully that was correct, Harley. I'm absolutely
Yeah,
delighted to welcome you to the channel.
yeah, all correct. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so this will be my fifth year in Ukraine. Um, Firstly as a bit of a tourist, and then secondly as a sapper. So yeah.
And that's kind of fascinating because there's a lot of people who have volunteered. Really, it was the impulse of seeing the full-scale war rather than the long war that's been going on now for a decade. But what was your motivation? I mean, obviously, you're clearly motivated far earlier than many people who've volunteered. What motivated you, and what were you seeing that really sort of forced you to go there and check it out for yourself?
Yeah, so in terms of the lifestyle, I mean, I actually ended up there by accident. It was a case of a bit of a misadventure to Krakow, and then I ended up in Kharkiv, and then I ended up staying there for a while, and then keep going back. I met some friends there that I wanted to visit, um, and yeah, just I stayed, and I started then living between Ukraine and the UK. And I was doing this. I was studying at the time as well at University of Salford. So I was also remotely studying from Ukraine, living there, and just enjoying the life really. Because you probably know yourself. It as a Western expat, life can be quite comfortable in Ukraine compared to how it can be in the UK. So yeah, it was good. And
Well,
then
I know that
obviously,
as a student a long time ago in the 90s in Russia, yeah, on a tiny student grant, that could go quite a long way.
oh
You
yeah,
could travel quite a lot as well at the time.
yeah, definitely. I was working remotely as well, picking up bits of work and stuff. But life was good, it was good, and I was still coming back to the UK because I do have a daughter here. I'm obviously separated from the mother, but I've got I like to keep that that's my daughter, so that's more important than anything else. So yeah, but yeah, I've balanced it. I've done well, and yeah, this will be my fifth year into Ukraine. I've worked uh, pretty much all regions in Ukraine. I've traveled the whole country at this point now, numerous times over. And now I am predominantly based in the south, in Kherson and Mykolaiv region.
And which part, at what point in time did you really start to see a need for your military expertise to really sort of be deployed and feel you actually had to start making a difference?
Yeah, so I think when I started, obviously I was working logistics as a volunteer for Zasu, and uh, I just wanted to get involved and really try and make a difference when it came to the landmines. Now, obviously, I work in areas where people have, nothing. I mean, far away from the lands of Kiev. I go to areas where these people, some of them haven't even seen an international aid agency. You know, and that's in the landmine crisis, and that's in how people was living amongst these mines after liberation, and just thought, maybe we can do something about it because I've been quite successful in my work as a volunteer in Ukraine. I've made a lot of things happen, and I do take a lot of pride in my work. I mean, I have a hell of a lot of passion for my job. I'm quite well known as being very patriotic towards Ukraine, probably more than a lot of Ukrainians, to be honest. So that is something that I wanted to kind of carry on onto the demining sector. So what I did, I uh, went to study demining actually in Kosovo, and yeah, and the rest is history, really. I mean, I wanted to hit the ground running, and I did hit the ground running. And then last year, between me and 15 other members of our team, between 12 and 15, I mean, some guys just came, spent a month with us, and all Ukrainian, by the way. I'm the only British guy in the team, but we removed 8,500 landmines in 6 months. Um, and that's a base figure. It's probably more than that actually, but we removed that many, which is a serious amount of landmines in terms of and results compared to others, really,
And how
that
many
have been
square
doing the same.
miles? I mean, that territory that's sort of liberated and cleaned, because that be used for as farmland, or is it still within, range of Russian strikes?
Oh no, it's well within range of Russian strikes. Yeah, just 9 days ago, we was in a minefield. I'll just explain a bit to you. So it's down by the bank near Berislav, and we was down in a field down that way, and we was getting hit by artillery within half a kilometre. So there were strikes happening as we was clearing, and it was a case of like, we had to take a bit of drastic action as well and get out there. But for me, I kind of had to judge the situation as well that day because the risk isn't worth the reward in them areas just yet because there's also um, not only do we obviously want to get the mines out, but there's also the thought that the Russians might return. And I do believe that that is a strong possibility. The way the Ukrainians are building their defense and anti-tank defenses and trenches and stuff in that area, that there's something that they know that hasn't been said yet, and that is that the Russians will probably try to come back for Kherson again.
And then the Russian mines could theoretically work against them because I assume that
Exactly.
they haven't
Yeah.
mapped them. They don't know where they've stuck this
No
stuff.
chance.
So,
Yeah, yeah, no chance. Just in that day from 10 a.m. to 3:30, we cleared 93 anti-tank mines. Um, yeah, so as you can imagine how dense the mine situation is out there in terms of like numbers and stuff. Um, that's just one field, by the way, that we're not finished with yet. It's we had to use that field because it was the only dry field. Um, there's a big problem with mud in Ukraine, as you probably know. Mud is a huge logistical problem. 1 hour working physically in that mud can feel like 4, 5 hours. It's really draining. Um, and also, it's a problem for vehicles as well. So the field that we worked last week was the only dry field in that area, the mines. So we're still a way off demining season. Yeah, I think there's another 4 or 5 weeks before we can actually like physically start going out there, pulling some real numbers up.
and there's two sort of fairly, I think, sort of, it's going to seem very basic questions to you, but I think is for me and the audience, it's a really introduction to this topic. As you're clearing the mines, are you deactivating them, or
Yeah.
are you able to shift them to reuse them in another setting?
Yeah, so what we do, we remove the fuses remotely. We have devices which are Ukrainian made, which are called DZM devices, and they will remove the fuse from 50 meters away. We obviously have to attach it to the mine physically in person, and then we pull it, and it'll spin off the fuse. But in terms of anti-personnel mines, we have to obviously destroy them in place. Yeah, they're the dangerous ones. It's the anti-tank mines, are not really the ones you want to worry about. It's the anti-personnel because
Because you could step on the tank ones, and you not the weight is not what they're seeking there. Not
yeah, yeah. Well, they have lowered the weight on some of them, and some of them are booby trap. They'll what they've done is like they've triple stacked them or double stacked them. So sometimes what they'll do is put an anti-personnel mine under the anti-tank mine. Yeah, which will then obviously activate the whole thing. But they've also put anti-lift devices as well under the anti-tank mines. Oh, not all of them. Like there'll be a select percentage. Some areas you can go miles without seeing this device. It's called an ML8, and it's just like a little matchbox sort of thing, but it's enough to detonate the anti-tank mine if you lift it. So what we do, we remove the fuse remotely, but we also flip the mine remotely as well at the same time. So it'll spin the fuse off and then flip the mine just to make sure there's nothing underneath. Um, Yeah. So, and it's not just mines, it's shells. There's all sorts of different things. Shells, rockets, air to surface rockets from helicopters. That's a big one. A lot of them haven't, exploded. They're just stuck in the ground and stuck in villages and stuff in the homes. Because what we did a lot last year of is clearing um, obviously the UXO and the mines from villages, which then allowed the builders to come in and rebuild the houses. We did a hell of a lot of that in a lot of the villages in Kherson because, as obviously me and you mentioned, talked about earlier, off camera, some of these people, they're on a waiting list of 2, 3 years before they see any sort of rebuild. And I assume that Ukraine probably doesn't want to pump a lot of money in these areas just yet, just in case, again, the Russians decide to come back.
In case they're retaken, and that's a certain risk. And we won't talk about the shift to the defensive posture, which we know is taking place, but obviously we don't talk about sort of details around that. But we also know that Russia is making big pushes along the front um, during this so-called ammunition famine.
Yeah,
Again, not revealing any sensitive details there because it's very much sort of talked about. But that gives a lot of uncertainty, doesn't it, to the economy, to the people. And there must be people here who have been liberated and are haven't had income for a number of years, and they're just raring to get into the fields. And we know Ukrainians are by nature very hardworking people. It must be an intense frustration to many people that they're still not able to rebuild their livelihoods.
absolutely. Well, as I stated before to you again off camera, our team consists of mainly people who lived under occupation. A lot of our team is actually from Nova Kakhovka as well, which is obviously occupied territory. And these guys, this is their, even though we are volunteers and stuff, this is their now job, which they don't get paid for, but they have a village house to live in. They get meals. They get, if they need something, we just buy it. Because we get donors and stuff online. We do have support and stuff online of people on the internet. But that this is now their income. These are guys who used to be engineers. One guy used to make bouncy castles. And we also have a farmer as well who, in a shell strike, actually, he lost his house, lost his wife, and he literally lives in the ruins of the house in like a closed off bit that is actually made habitable. And his son's just been killed in the fight in November, and his son is actually buried in the cemetery next to the house. Now, I do have a video on that, which will go online in the next couple of weeks, but it's just to show people the story of what's actually happened down her son and how difficult, the whole last 2 years have been for these people. Some of these villages that we cleared, one called Herker in Kherson recently, um, there's nobody left. There's two or three families living there, and they poisoned the water in the village. They actually threw their own dead soldiers down the well to poison the water, and all the wildlife is dead. They're living amongst the mines, which we have cleared pretty much all of the mines around that village. We spent a hell of a long time there last year to try and make it, safe again and stuff. But it's going to be a long time before there's any sort of recovery in these areas. Yeah,
That's tragic, isn't it? I mean, there's a lot of people obviously who are abroad who made it out as refugees.
yeah,
But in speaking to some of them, I mean, some of them have actually gone back, but many of them don't have cities to go back to, or villages to go back to. They're devastated. Others, families that I met from Mariupol are still under occupation. So of course, that's very much up in the air there. From your experience on the ground, we're hearing, of course, more and more, and this is very much a Russian talking point, which unfortunately gets a lot of traction, and that is the idea of negotiations, freezing the front lines, and it's labeled as peace. But many of your team have lived under occupation, and as you say, are now fighting with every hour and every sort of calorie of energy they've got to liberate their lands. This gives the lie, doesn't it, to the idea of peace? Because if people are left under occupation, you're essentially leaving them to be um, hostages within a territory of extreme lawlessness and brutality and terrible treatment of Ukrainians, people of Ukrainian nationality, whether they are Russian speaking or Ukrainian speaking.
Yeah. I think at this point in the war, I think the morale obviously is extremely low. I mean, we've just watched Avdiivka be taken. You know, this is a city that is very close to me. I spent a year working in Avdiivka, and that small city has withstood occupation for over 10 years. Um, and I think that the occupation of Avdiivka is has lowered morale. You know, really, really bad. Lower that, worse than Bakhmut, in my opinion, from a Ukrainian's point of view. Um, but the thought of having to live under that Russian occupation, I think, is just it's unthinkable for some. But on the other hand, I really, really, really don't know, and as controversial as it may seem, whether Ukraine has the strength to take these territories back. I mean, people underestimate how much land the Russians actually occupy. It's a huge amount of land. You know, you know how long it'll take to drive from Kherson to Pokrovsk. I think I did it last week. Pokrovsk to Kherson, it was like 6.5 hours, and they occupy that whole, lower than that, all that whole line across, sort of thing. If you know what I mean, everything down. And does Ukraine have the just it's not even the case of whether they have the willpower because they've got the willpower, but do they have the equipment and the lives to spare anymore? I don't know. Um, and I hate to say it, but I don't see at this point how it's gonna end. Where everybody's going to be happy. And I don't think it'll never end that way. You know, no one's ever going to be happy. But
And it seems that I mean, we're talking about this on the channel for some time, and Ben Hodges and others, and it does seem that just fighting on the conventional front is not a path to Ukrainian victory, whereas the unconventional war, forcing Russia into internal collapse, into internal strife, is perhaps the only way to achieve a substantial victory. The kind of victory that all Ukrainians relied on really necessitates a major, say, black swan type event in Russia itself. Now, you can wait for a black swan to come along, or you can do what Bogdanov and his team are doing, and that is create the circumstances where black swans become more likely. But is that a kind of sense that's shared by Ukrainians that you speak to?
no, no, not at all. I think the thing is that Ukrainians don't really value Russians in the sense of how obviously the mentality and things. I think obviously Ukrainians view Russians as slaves to the regime, which I also share that to a degree. Um, and I think that Russians don't care about Russian lives. I'm a firm believer of that. I mean, they can just quite happily get on the daily business knowing that 1,000 of the soldiers just died yesterday. They don't care because the thing is, the lives that are being spared, the lives that are being obviously sent to Ukraine, dying, the Russian lives that are dying on Ukrainian land, don't really matter to them. I mean, you're talking about alcoholics and people from places like Tuva and stuff where employment
Criminals
is,
as well.
yeah, criminals and just the I think well, just a statistic that I actually seen the other week, whether there's much truth in it or not, but they said that out of nearly 400,000 Russian casualties, only 0.9 actually come from 0.9% come from Moscow. And I can believe that. I mean, I can believe that. Knowing then what I've seen, obviously, on the front lines from the day one of the war to around the east and the south, these and the bodies that we find in the minefield as well. We find bodies that have just been left there. That some have been there for a year and a half, and from what you see in their IDs and stuff, it's they're not of like a Russian like a ethnicity, if you know what I mean. Like
Yeah.
what you'd expect. It's more of a Chinese looking person. So
And
um
there's contempt. I assume there's total contempt. They're not
yeah,
really
yeah,
putting much effort into collecting these people, and they didn't perhaps have equipment that's valuable either, so there's no incentive
no,
to.
no. But again, I don't think I really don't think the Ukraine have enough to win the war at this point. That's just me being brutally honest, and I'm completely pro-Ukrainian. I've just been announced this week that I'm a terrorist against Russia. Russia have labeled me a terrorist now. Yeah, yeah. For what I think, what is it? Rehabilitation of Nazism. They've said about me. So
All
yeah,
right, yeah,
yeah,
that's it.
I,
Clearing
yes,
mines and helping farmers.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
very Nazi. Yeah.
Well, I said they've labelled me a terrorist, but the ironic thing is that I spend my life and dedicate my life to clearing up the terror left by them. You know, these aren't Ukrainian mines; these are Russian mines. And I was reading some statistics. That 260. I've written it down here. 264 civilians as of October 23 have been killed by landmines. Most recently, it was actually a 14-year-old in Bashtanka, which was an area that we work in. And yeah, so for me, regardless of what they say about me, I know I'm doing the right thing. I'm doing good work. We are doing really good work out there, but we've got a lifetime's work ahead of us. Um,
Let's turn to the scale of that because before we hit record, you were describing the scale of the number of landmines that were placed, the fact that they are not logged or registered, which is a legal requirement. But of course, we know that Russia has no um, interest in following, international law or Geneva Conventions or anything like that. But what are the
yep.
scale we're talking about here? It's often been compared to the Second World War. The Second World War was quite a mobile war. Is this fairly unprecedented? The sort of quantity of landmines and the distribution across, how much territory?
Yeah, well, there's a statistic which has said that 30% of Ukrainian territory is affected by landmines. That's the equivalent to the size of the state of Florida. So, yeah, we're talking a huge amount. And when I say, as I spoke to before off camera, it's not just a scattered landmines. I mean, these are laid in by the hundred. You could see a line of 100 or two lines of 200. I mean, the most we ever cleared in one day was 252 last summer. 12 hours a day in the field, right? Quite a lot of us working, but yeah, that was just one field. And then with the anti-tank mines, you have the anti-personnel mines, which are the real dangerous ones. They have all sorts of different ways of operating. Some are operated by tripwire. The Russians are replacing the conventional tripwire that comes with the actual kit with fishing line, so it's harder to detect. Um, they're even putting hooks on there. There's booby traps as well. And like a typical booby trap that you might see as well is you'll see an anti-tank mine. They'll purposely expose it so you see it, and then they'll mine the ditches because obviously they know we're going to pull that mine from a distance. They know we're not going to walk up and pull it, in person. Um, so they'll mine the actual ditches where they think we're going to pull from, you know, with anti-personnel mines. So it's just little tactics and tricks like that have been going on. So, but each area is different. You see different patterns, especially where Wagner used to operate. There's a lot more complex and complicated devices found. And, you know, even the Cheburashka Teddy, the Cheburashka cartoon figure, they tend to stuff them with explosives, the teddy bears, and because Cheburashka is obviously a symbol of Soviet Union and Russia, and obviously you know it well.
That was the
I
Olympic
know it well.
symbol, I mean, that is
Yeah,
the
yeah,
desecration of the Olympic spirit right there.
yeah. Well, obviously, if a Ukrainian sees Cheburashka, he's either going to pick it up or he's going to throw it, and they know that, so they'll booby trap that teddy. You know, um, yeah. So yeah, this is all sorts of sophisticated things going on, and used by both sides as well. It's not just the Russians; the Ukrainians are finding more sophisticated ways, and this is a very strange. What's the word? It's just a very strange war, really, where anything's used at this point. You've said explosive devices being made out of the non-stop energy drink cans and bottles of Coke filled with explosives and nails and all sorts of things. It's very dangerous, complex, and that's why our job is probably the most dangerous job in Ukraine. On average, we lose two sappers a day in Ukraine on the Ukrainian side. So
And that's skill loss as well. I'm sure the Russians are
absolutely,
really keen on targeting you guys because it's not just the manpower, it's the extraordinary skill and experience that you build up, and all, as you say, all these tricks that you learn. That knowledge is going with the person.
absolutely. So what we try and do is without going too much into it, but we try and meet up a group of us experienced guys from different areas and discuss things that we've seen, new things that we've seen, different tactics and stuff. And I also watched the Russian Sapper channels on Telegram. They know that we watch them, and I'm sure they do the same. But for me, I'm not mining in an offensive way. It's just a complete clear of landmines for me. It's not a. I'm not laying them to defeat anybody. I do agree with Ukraine laying landmines to protect its borders. I mean, that's quite a controversial thing to say these days, but I think at this point in the war, and after seeing what Russia does when it arrives in these areas, then they have every right to protect themselves. Um, yeah, and I was I was told the other week not to say certain things in terms of the reuse of landmines and stuff, but in my opinion and my experience and what I've seen and working in the frontline areas, I fully agree with Ukraine being able to reuse landmines if necessary.
Well,
In
we know
terms
from recent videos, Russian incursions are increasing in certain areas, especially
yeah,
around Kharkiv and in the north and Sumy region. And when they come in, they randomly shoot
yeah,
pensioners, farmers, civilians,
absolutely.
horrific stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, back in the early days, I mean, I was one of the first people into Makariv who was British after liberation. And what they'd done to that place in Kiev. People talk about Bucha, but the reality was is that Borodianka and Makariv got a lot, worse of a beating than Bucha did. Bucha just a more well known. But Borodianka and Makariv are in the vicinity, and the brutality uh, used by them, and even the brutality used on their own soldiers at the time. They even executed their own. Yeah, you can't afford for these people to come back. It's as simple as that. And if Ukraine has to, use whatever it has to use in order for them to defend themselves, then I'm all for that.
Let's extend that out to the West because this battle is existential for the Ukrainians. As you said, it's a matter of life and death. Are we failing to see it actually as a serious existential threat to us in the West? And I know you're over in the UK now with the second anniversary, really trying to highlight some of these, trying to get this experience across. Um, what more should we be doing to support Ukraine in this fight, which at the end of the day is helping ourselves as well?
I think yeah. So as you said the other day, I was speaking in Manchester, trying to basically educate people on what I think and what I see in Ukraine. First of all, I think the leaders that do come to Ukraine need to start maybe branching out to some of the cities that are actually under direct conflict and affected directly from the war every single day. I mean, going to places like Lviv and Kiev isn't a true reflection of what's going on in Ukraine, and that'll never show you a true reflection of what's going on in Ukraine. Now, if I was a Western leader personally and I got invited to Kiev, yeah, I'd be pretty disappointed, because I want to see what's going on, and you're not going to get that in Kiev. You got there's people driving around in Ferraris and drinking champagne and things like that. As much as I hate to say that, that's the truth. I'm a realist. Um, Unfortunately, Kiev has a lot of people who thinks the war doesn't apply to them. You know, um, so I want to see these Western leaders. I want to see them going to places like Kramatorsk, Kherson, Kharkiv, and really showing some balls and some character, um, and showing Putin and stuff that we're not going to tolerate it anymore. Giving Ukraine some real weaponry. They need to start using aerial bombs. We've been saying this for months. The Russians are smashing the Ukrainians with aerial bombs. Ukraine's not doing it back. Why? Just aerial bombs. The Fabs use them. Yeah. Um, it weakens the infantry, it weakens the offensive, everything, and Ukraine's just not doing it. And we need to supply more of them bombs, in my opinion. Um, I think personally, I think the front line of this war, the actual conflict zone starts at the Kherson checkpoint, and I'm only speaking for the south here. I only work in the south. I was in the east last week, but I'm not going to speak for the east. Uh, Anything before that, Mykolaiv, Odessa, and that's not a war zone, in my opinion. If you happen to get hit by a rocket, you're extremely unlucky. I feel safer on the streets in Odessa and Mykolaiv than I do in Manchester. Manchester's a very hostile place, to be honest, in my opinion. But I just think us in the West, I feel like we really, really, really need to start taking this conflict seriously. I feel like the really half-hearted attempts from our leaders and just shit promises. Like to put it bluntly, I mean everything's shit. It's just really half-hearted. I had a girl. She's a medic with the British Army. Yeah, she said to me, she's like, you've trained the Ukrainian soldiers before, and I have. Yeah, I trained the 47th. We did some demining techniques. I was assisting some other instructors, but I'm also training to be an instructor myself. Yeah. So she's like, we're really struggling training these soldiers. Yeah, we've done a survey, and only 7% of these Ukrainian soldiers find our training useful. So I was like, okay, what are you training them? She's like, we've been training them trench warfare techniques or something like that. I was like, what? Bearing in mind, yeah, she's 26, never fought in a trench in her life. Yeah, she well, we haven't fought in a trench since World War I. And we're teaching soldiers who've just done 6 months in a trench how to suck eggs. You know, So she's like, how do I get them to listen? I said, get them to show you, you know,
Mm.
get them to show you. They're not idiots. They've done it. And that is how you'll get them to listen. Because that's what I had to do. Because I was teaching these guys demining techniques who'd been doing it for months. And I could tell that people was bored. I was looking around. I was like, have you done this before or something? He's like, oh, yeah, yeah. I'm like, why didn't you tell me that yesterday? You know? And then eventually they were showing me things that I didn't know. And it was like, and it was good then. It was engaging. And, we still speak to each other today.
This
And
is
they,
absolutely fascinating because I had this
yeah,
conversation with someone the other day, and it's like not only have they got experience of trench warfare and various sort of flavors of that, but it's combined with that aerial reconnaissance and drone warfare. So you've got the low and the high tech coming together. Well, NATO trained people have no experience of that, And the guy I was speaking to, I said, so is the British Army, looking at these hundreds of hours of footage, are they breaking it down to look at, the latest techniques which evolve month on month? And he just quietly shook his head.
No, they don't. No, they don't. As far as I know, there's been no training on any Russian munitions. I know a guy who studied Russian munitions for 20 odd years, who's now been liaising with the army. He's a British man, and this is only just happening now, you know. And I just think that the minute, like us in the West, we're so weak, and we militarily, I think we're so weak. I think we're very naive in the fact that we've kind of lived in this peaceful Europe for so long. That we've Russia smelt blood years ago. And they've capitalized on it. This is what I said back in 2014 when they just walked into Crimea and nobody did anything. Putin smelt blood. You know, and he thought, hang on a minute, I can, and he just capitalised on it. That's what's happened here. And again, we're weak, and we're just not taking it seriously enough. We're not taking Ukraine seriously enough. We're not taking Ukrainians seriously enough. Like I said to you, just then in regards to the training and stuff, I think the British military is so like it's the best way to describe it. So far up their own ass, you know.
Well, they're
The,
run
the,
by
the,
managers and
yeah,
administrators, not
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. And the thing is that what I was saying is as well. I was speaking yesterday, and in Manchester, is that our soldiers and our military, we were so used to being on the front foot and having superiority in the air, and one thing I say about Ukraine is that if we get hurt, there's no helicopter or anything come and save the day. We are on the back foot. We are the underdog, and I think because the British military have never really been that underdog for such a long time. We are so far up our own ass that we just don't realize there's a problem until it's too late. And I feel like we're at that point now.
Well, the analogy is often made with the Second World War, and we talk about Chamberlain, ceding territory after territory to Hitler, etc. And that example's been made. But what is less understood is at the same time as the appeasement was going on, Britain was desperately planning and rearming. So they weren't just sort of sitting back,
Mm-hmm.
waiting for 1939 to happen. There was already
Mm-hmm.
a lot of stuff taking place behind the scenes,
Yeah,
retooling factories, trying to find, designs and testing that was actually going to be a match for the German machines. And obviously, a lot of scaling up was required, but we didn't just sit on our hands in that period. And it seems that that's what we have been doing for 2 years.
yeah, and I also think that the British public as well. I mean, they're so fed up of the government and everything else. Is that all this just is? It's just a joke to everybody. I mean, it's not taken seriously because how can anybody take anything seriously after the last 20 years that we've had? The people are that broken and depressed that nobody really cares anymore. You know, and if it comes to a point where Britain has to fight or is invaded by one of these you know Russia, China, or whatever, if it ever came to that, which I don't think it would, I think we're too technologically advanced in this day and age for all out ground war in Europe. Um, but if it ever did come to mobilization, I mean, it'd be a very, very sad time for Britain,
Sad
and
times for me, I'd
yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
I'm not sure I'd be able to get into shape for that, but at least I
No,
speak
no,
Russian,
same,
so
same,
maybe.
same. To be honest, I've only had I had a few months off over winter, and when we was demining last week, I was carrying each mine weighs like 7 kilograms, so I've got two in one hand and two in the other, and I'm doing like this farmer's walk through this muddy field, and honestly, I was doing it for about 3 hours, and honestly, I felt like death the day after, because yeah, I'm just not prepared for it, not physically fit enough, haven't really done much over the winter period apart from eat and stuff like that. So
I'd,
yeah,
I'd be
I think
volunteering for an
I think
intelligence unit to
yeah,
listen to
yeah,
what, drunken
yeah.
Russians swearing at each other and trying to get some intelligence from
Well,
that.
that's why this year I'm hoping to become more of an instructor rather than hands-on in the field. So just to tell you a bit about what our plans are this year. So we are looking at training veterans and people who've been signed off from direct combat duties. So amputees, people who can still work and still serve the country. We do feel like that will combat a lot of the PTS problems as well that are going to come, the inevitable ones that are going to come with this conflict. Because it gives people a purpose. It gives people a purpose to still serve the country. Ukrainians are very patriotic people, and to transition from that military life to that civilian one is going to be very difficult for a lot of the guys who can't serve anymore. Because I know people like to think that Ukraine's dragging these people off the streets to chuck them in the army and stuff. That's not actually happening, by the way. UDAR, which is the army that obviously I serve with, we held an open day yesterday in Kiev, an open training session for civilians, and over 300 people voluntarily attended that session to learn military skills and medic skills. And that was just one day in Kiev. So I don't think we're going to be struggling for soldiers, and that's something we'll be rolling out across each city in Ukraine as well.
That's brilliant. And of course, you're over here really try and build awareness of what's going on. So, what's the plan for the rest of the time? Because you've been to Manchester, and I
Yeah.
know there's going to be a lot of people from Manchester watching this who were incensed by your remarks earlier. And you obviously haven't been to Stockport because that's even hairier than central Manchester.
Well, I'm from Blackburn originally. I mean,
Oh, there we go. I
Blackburn's
knew.
a rough, yeah, it's a rough place. Yeah, so my plans this year, obviously, I'm home now. I'm home now for about 10 days, and then I go back to Ukraine in the coming weeks. And I've also got a meeting in Croatia, which is to help promote and um, it's with the Ukraine government actually. They've invited me, so and it's going to promote basically the landmine crisis and hopefully give people some more knowledge and get what's really going on out there. I mean, they're quite keen for somebody who's a Western sapper to go out there and explain what's actually happening in Ukraine. I do have some of the Ukrainian government officials that signed up to my YouTube channel. And they have done nothing but thank me last year just for showing them the true reality of what's going on in Kherson. Obviously, one of them reached out to me and he's like, thank you, for showing me what's really happening. Because when I arrive, I get the red carpet treatment and I don't get to see all this, you know. So yeah,
And that's important for strategic decision making, isn't it? Having a realistic picture of.
absolutely, yeah, yeah. I try to be a realist in my words. I don't really hold back on what I think and stuff. Um, as long as it doesn't really get me in trouble. I try not to, allow myself to get in trouble. But I think that people deserve the truth and people need to know what's going on. And that's the only way that, Ukraine's going to be helped in the long run. It's just by being honest and transparent about what's going on in these areas and what the Russians have actually done in these areas.
Yeah.
Even when I was talking earlier about the reuse of landmines. I mean, yeah, it's so controversial for some strange reason, but I don't really understand what's controversial about using their own munitions against them, the people who brought them there. I mean, yeah, to
It's the same
protect
with
the
cluster munitions, wasn't it? I
yeah,
mean, there's a
yeah,
big controversy around that. But at this point, if it helps you save Ukrainian lives and doesn't add to their problems, then it would seem to be sensible to deploy those.
absolutely. I mean, people need to understand that it's not a church bake sale. This is a war, and it's a war where the the occupiers not adhering to the rules themselves. You know,
In fact, there are no
in
rules.
every way imaginable. There are no rules. You know, so why should we have to abide by the rules all the time just to
As long as
appease
you don't
everybody
fall to their
else?
level of cruelty, but they're using
Exactly. Yeah.
techniques, absolutely. The very last
Yeah.
question here is, and there'll
Yeah.
be a lot of people watching this who will want to know how they can help out, but
Yeah.
also an interesting area is there still room to innovate and change and use new technologies and methods to increase, the scope and speed and safety of demining?
Absolutely. Yeah. So there is some companies out there that are developing technologies. I mean, there's a lot of these big demining machines that everybody's trying to make, and it, I'll be honest with you. I mean, complete waste of money at this point. If you put a £3 million demining machine near that front line, all it takes is a $500 FPV drone just to come and blow that thing up. It wouldn't last 10 minutes on the front line, you know. But there is technology that is coming, and there is technology that is being tried and tested over there. Now we have been using some technology which is called SafePro, um, which is an American company. I've not been using it personally, but my colleague Kevin, he flies a drone and he's been using this. Now we're basically what we're doing at the minute. We're just trialing the technology. In basic terms, I'll explain how it works. So it'll do a survey of the land, and it has a pre-programmed list of munitions that it looks for on the surface. Yeah, and it will pick these what it thinks is a mine or what it thinks is an artillery shell up, and it will basically relay that data back to us and tell us exactly where it is, what it looks like, and things like that. But we are correcting it and making it more accurate at this point. We're just doing plenty of surveys and sending them back to America, and they are, correcting that. But yeah, that's all
If it doesn't get
voluntary at the minute. Yeah.
100% of the targets, you've still got to do the full sweep, I would have thought.
Of course, yeah, yeah. Nothing will ever beat manual clearance. I mean, that is my. I always say that I'm pretty solid on that as well. I mean, yeah, machines and drones and things that they will help save lives and they do protect the sapper as much as possible. But in my opinion, is that everything's going to have to be manually cleared. I mean, a lot of these machines don't pick up anything under the surface. They're only picking up surface items. I mean, what about if it's buried? They're
With
using
the mud, I
technology.
guess stuff
Yeah,
stuff
yeah,
actually sinks down as well, doesn't it? With
yeah,
a
yeah. And for us, we're just volunteers. We're part of UDA, which is a volunteer army. We're not under contract. We don't get any money from any Ukraine. I mean, we don't believe in taking money from Ukraine to defend Ukraine anyway. That's kind of a motto and a stance that we have. But funds are tight, and we just do what we can. I mean, our operational costs, just to give you an example, last year for 6 months was £6,200 between the months of July, end of June, July to December. That was our operational cost, £6,200, and we removed 8,500 landmines in that process, and with over 5,000 munitions given back to the army.
That's extraordinary value for money.
Yeah, exactly.
Extraordinary. Yeah.
Yeah, we try to do our best. That's just like diesel and rental of the base that we use, but we are looking at using another base this year because it's a lot closer to the actual minefields where we're going to be working. Because for us, we spend an hour, 2 hours just going to the minefields in the vehicle, and then we've got to do the same on the way home.
And with the ammunition there, so I'm assuming here that you're able to potentially recover Russian shells that can then be used in Soviet
Yeah.
artillery pieces. That's
Yes, we recovered quite a considerable amount last year of 155 shells and all sorts of different types of munitions, even guns, assault rifles and stuff. Because you need to remember as well, we also clear the old Russian positions, so a lot of the munitions are still, they've been abandoned there. In Kherson, obviously, you know how quick Ukraine took Kherson back. A lot of the Russians just basically left everything around, just got out of there. So we have been on a good Easter egg hunt
amazing.
last
All right.
year. Yeah, yeah. So, but again, we also found dead bodies as well in that pyramid. They get handed over to the relevant authorities.
Yeah, and unlike the Russian forces, I believe Ukrainian forces will then try to contact the families. So that's an extraordinary,
Yeah,
much more humane approach there.
yeah,
I
absolutely.
It's such a privilege speaking to you and to get that sort of first-hand insight. And of course, I get the impression you'll tell us exactly how it is rather than sugarcoating it, which of course is fantastic for the
Yeah,
audience here to get
yeah,
that. Um, we'll pop a link into the description, certainly for people who want to know how they can help out, whether it's through
yeah.
donations, contributions, or if they actually have some experience and they may want to do something more. So pop that into the description. Strongly encourage them to try and catch up with you guys. You're going to be in London, is that right, on Saturday for the,
Um,
or where are you going to
I'm
be?
not there, but Brandon's going to. I think they're in Edinburgh today, and then they go to Cardiff.
Okay.
they've been in London already. I'm
Oh,
not
so they're
sure if
doing
they go
Cardiff
back
for the
there. Yeah,
anniversary,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Well, definitely
But
worth catching up.
we will be organising something this year, um, just to basically highlight the problems of the landmines in Ukraine and what we're doing to tackle it. And yeah, we will be announcing that at some point this year. So yeah, that'd be good. It's something for everybody to look forward to, and it also shows people exactly where the money goes as well. Because one thing I have done is give our donors the opportunity when times are right to come to Ukraine and actually show them the work that we've done, because we've had a lot of people who've done it and followed us for such a long time, and we want to obviously give something back to them as well, and show them some appreciation for our work. Because in Kherson, like I said, it's very rural. It's a long way from the cities, and these areas, nobody's even looked at them yet apart from us. And our help's really, really, really made a difference out there. Yeah,
That's extraordinary. And yeah, when you do have those dates, or if you have any information to share, chuck it over. We'll share it with the community on this channel. And I know there's a lot of channels that have dedicated audiences, Written Ukrainian, Operator Starsky, and others. But let's just
yeah,
make
yeah,
sure those get sort of shared around. But thank you
yeah.
so much, Harley. I mean, it's a real
Thank you.
privilege to talk to you about this. And
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. And just I will just say my channel is actually called UAEOD, which is UA space EOD. And I'm sure you'll put it in the description anyway. But anybody can find our videos, and there will be some content coming up in the next week when I've started doing my editing, the dreaded editing. I'm gonna have to do it at some point. I mean, I've been really, really busy, and it's just like you know
should get
how
some
it is.
Ukrainian volunteers. I'm sure there are some
Yeah,
video
yeah.
editors who are
I
sitting
know,
on
but
their hands.
I'm very basic at it as well. But it's just, yeah, I think what it is, it's important for me to do my own because I also know how to stay within the law and what I need to show and what I don't. And I suppose, it's only really me who can do the editing.
That's fair enough. That's fair
Yeah,
enough. Well, we will definitely watch out for that. I mean, it'll be
yeah, brilliant.
extraordinarily compelling sort of content there. So do share it
Absolutely.
around. Thanks so much. Good luck with the incredible
Thank
work
you.
that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.